Hi, and welcome to Second Level Impact. I am Candace Cieslo, and I am joined by my beautiful friend and co-host, Patti Catter.
Thank you. Should we update this intro and say, hi, you're listening to Second Level Impact, and this is my beautiful friend, Candace.
I like throwing it to you. I have to admit, I like throwing it to her. No, she's amazing. So that's why I introduced her that way, because no matter how many times we do this, she still impresses me. So that is why I introduced you like that.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I feel the same way about you without getting all mushy
I
and
know,
stuff.
blah, blah, blah. No mushy. No mushy. We're done with that.
Yeah,
We're going to
totally
talk
done.
about mean parents. No.
Yes, let's talk about those mean parents. Yes.
No, so today we're going to discuss kind of kids and parents and those relationships that are important as children develop. There are stages of when they're little children, when they're toddlers, when they become your tweens, your preteens, your teens, and then adult children. And every phase is a little bit different. And I believe as the parents grow and mature, the relationships can change and lessons learned. So I think that's probably where we're going to start from, is our perspective of lessons learned as the child of parents, as the parent of little children, big children, adult children. So I think we could probably cover the gamut on our perspective and experiences. So Patti, where do you want to start? With the little kids, the sports?
Let's start with those babies. So I don't know about you, but there were some things as a new parent that I was so concerned about, overly concerned about. For example, my oldest daughter, she was about maybe 4 weeks old, maybe 3 weeks old. I took her to the emergency room because she had the hiccups for too long. Yeah.
Well, if you can't see my face.
Yeah. So I think sometimes, as a young parent, especially, we really over exaggerate things. And where I'm going with that is not only do you overreact as a new parent when you think, oh my gosh, my baby, like how many times also have you ever put your hand in front of the baby's face to make sure they're still breathing when they're just sleeping?
Yeah.
I think that's a natural instinct. And then as they're growing and they're learning different things, such as going upstairs, and you just want to hoover over them and be one of those little helicopter parents. But how long do you do that? How long do you hoover over them?
Well, you hoover, I hover. So so I read, we were older parents. And when our first was born, I think I was 29 with my oldest, and my husband was 34. So a little bit older than what our generation had. I read the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, and I followed that to a T. So we would put my oldest down, and that was it. He could cry himself stupid, and very quickly he learned, yep, mom and dad aren't going to come up here. So he would go down with nothing. We'd put him in bed, we'd say goodnight, and that was it. By the time the second one came around, I acquiesced a little bit because I didn't want to wake up the oldest. So I picked up the second one a little more. And then by the time the third one came, it was just whatever.
Game on.
Game on. Yeah. So, that whole first child, middle child, the baby, and how the order, it's because of us as parents. If I had one now, I'd be like, no, it's okay. You can play in the street. It's fine.
Yeah, the cars will go around you, honey.
Here's some Cheetos.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I was a middle child. And so I had, my sister was a lot older than me. So she's 8 years older than me. And then my brother was obviously younger. But what it was funny is, as a middle child, I felt like I was always like, hey, what about me? Because you have the oldest, you have the baby, and then you just have this middle kid, like getting on all the mischief and not getting caught. That was probably me. And I say mischief very, very loosely because I was a super good kid. Really, I was.
Yeah.
But what about you? Where did you fall in that?
I was the baby.
Oh, that explains a lot.
I was the baby. But my daughter is the middle of two boys, biological. We have more children, but biologically there are three, and she's the middle, but she has an older brother and a younger brother. So she has some middle child traits, but there was no competition.
Yeah.
So it was actually kind of ideal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like me too. I actually felt like an older sibling because my sister is so much older than me. So she was never even at home from the time I was in like second grade. I think I was really young. She was already grown and out of the house and all of that. So, I was basically an older kid. Now I think that my parents put a lot of responsibility on me for sure. And I think that a lot of kids get a lot of pressure from their parents, I'm sorry. And I know I'm guilty of also putting a little bit too much pressure on my kids, whether it was in their education or with their sports. We always had a rule, if you play sports, you have to finish that season at least before you decide if you're going to continue or not. So I never let them drop out of anything.
I think that's pretty steadfast. And I don't care what you've done. There are always things that you would want to correct in hindsight. And sometimes I wish I had been harder on my children and pushed them a little harder in the potential, even though they're amazing. But I was pushed so hard. And because the middle brother went to boarding school, my other brother was out in college. So I was basically the only child for 5 years. So I got all of that very intense focus on me to be the best. And so that kind of pressure, because there was no room, there was no second best. It was I was expected to be great. And with that kind of pressure, I failed in other ways that they weren't aware of. And so like my sense of self-worth, even though I was very confident in a lot of things, I was always seeking approval, that praise, because I wanted it to be great. I wanted it to be perfect, which you never can.
Right.
And because of that, it's trickled down on my children. I'm like, look, you just be happy. You do you. Like I've gone the other way and swung the other way. I'm like, just have peace in who you are, be able to be independent and have faith in God. And if those things are done, I'm good. I've done my job as a parent. So I wish I'd have pushed maybe a little more.
Yeah, it's so hard to say, right? Because no matter what you do as a parent, there will be a time where your child says that you didn't do something the right way. I mean, I did it to my parents. My kids have done it to me, and I'm sure that that's going to happen for many generations to come. So at the end of the day, I think as long as we give our kids loving homes, what they need, and hope for the best, I think that's good. Because how many times also do you hear of the children who were given everything? They were literally handed everything that they needed to succeed, and they turned into drug addicts, or they were into crime later on, or whatever. So it's really hard to tell how your kid's going to turn out.
I truly think that this idea of taking away the struggle, and I've said it before, but that butterfly life, the caterpillar has to struggle to get out of the chrysalis in order to fly. You can look that up and understand more of what I'm saying, but you have to struggle to grow. If you are not struggling, then you don't have the capacity to handle the next phase in your life. And if it wasn't for the struggle of physical, or like I went to basic training, I'm like, what, that's all you got? Man, I know someone who can really put some pressure on you if you want to come visit. So it really helped me propel, and each time I failed, it helped me move forward. So that constant growth, and it also creates empathy and understanding for other people. Once you've gone through something, some kind of struggle, if we let our children go through struggle, you are helping them. If you do not let your children go through struggle, then you are literally, in my opinion, you are literally hurting your children, because when something truly does come up where they need to have the grit to work through it, they will not have developed that endurance and that grit to work through the problem.
I mean, how many times have you seen grown adults, literally no joke, break down on TV having a screaming toddler fit as an adult because of a politician or because of what somebody said on TV? Those people, I mean, I'm assuming that they did not have good parents in their life. But then again, maybe they did. And maybe that's still how they turned out.
Yeah.
So
maybe the nature nurture question.
Right. So so one of the things that I've learned too, and I'm working on, is trying not to pressure my kids, is especially they're adults now. So trying not to pressure them in what they should be doing, because we've basically given them all the ammunition that they should need to be okay in life. Right. So one of the things I've really tried hard to do is just back off from giving them my input, my opinion on what I think they should be doing unless they ask me. Because also I think that can cause some conflict if they say, well, I didn't ask you, or I am going to do this anyways, or I wanted to try this. So how do you handle that when you're being a parent and you can obviously see something coming at them that's not going to be good? How do you remain still and let them deal with their own life choices?
And please know that we are not on zero level. Am I an expert? On zero level, am I criticizing or judging? I am talking from a place of failure and some of the successes and some of the pros and cons in my life.
Same.
So this has nothing, this is not a judgment. This is not telling you what to do. Is literally our experiences and what we have witnessed through the way we've done it. And for those of you that may have younger children and don't have adult children yet, I had an amazing conversation with Zach recently where he talked through just the stages of being embarrassed by everything and then kind of learning and then rebelling and then that and then coming back. And all of a sudden now it's just amazing to watch him go through these different stages of growth and understand now where we were coming from as parents. It wasn't do as I say, because it was, hey, these are things that, if you make this choice, this is the consequence, period. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what is also important to understand is that we're trying to open up dialogue with you. So if you're listening, we want to hear from you. We want to hear how you're doing things, how you are feeling like you're doing fantastic one way of parenting, and maybe you're having a struggle in another way. Open up those communications. And we have a Facebook group. You can go in the Facebook group and you can discuss our shows and you can discuss some of these hard topics that we're talking about. And like Candace said, the way she may do something, I might not do it, or vice versa. Or if you're listening and you're like, well, I believe you should have you should ground your kids for 5 months or whatever.
Right.
Like, parents have rights. And I believe that every parent should have a right to how they decide to discipline their kids. As long as it doesn't turn into an abusive situation, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. So. Well, there are things that before I had children, I didn't know if I'd have children or not. And before I had them, I was like, my child, if I ever had a child, or can you believe that person? Or I would never. If you don't have children, that is wonderful. That is a choice, and your life is amazing. And my life is amazing. And there's pros and cons with everything. But I know that I have done things that I swore I would never do.
Yeah.
One of which is we were a very much yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir kind of family. It's kind of Southern, kind of old fashioned. And I thought, I will never make my children do it. Then I realized it is not about me wanting, you will call me ma'am. It has nothing to do with that. It is literally about teaching them decorum, manners, respect, being polite, being courteous, and having it be a habit. So even when they disagree, they can say, well, no, sir, I disagree with you, instead of, some response that takes away some of the power of their position. Because when your children do say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am to adults, I cannot tell you the profound response that the adults have to that, because it's uncommon now.
It's so true. So as a child who was made to say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, that was me. This school that I went to, that was, you have to answer yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. But I'll tell you what, it does make a difference, because I remember meeting people outside of the school or outside of our atmosphere that we were in. And if I said yes, ma'am, no, ma'am to anybody, a server at a restaurant, for example, like, how kind is that? And people will treat you so much nicer than if you're like, yeah, dude, I'd love a milkshake, please. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's a huge difference. So that's one of the few things I'm like, well, my children, I'll never da 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 da. I'll never da 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 da. And I've done it. So
yeah, I think we all have. The big thing when I was growing up was like corporal punishment was a huge a huge ordeal, where some people believed in spanking, some didn't, some some still do, some still don't, or, you know what I mean? So it's a very controversial subject, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to live with your decisions on how you decide to discipline your kids. And we're not telling you how to do that.
No, my first spanking at school was from Miss Bobby Britton.
That name is so Southern.
Well, she's from New York. She was from New York, and she moved down to the small little town. Amazing teacher. Loved her to death. She has passed. But just an amazing person and teacher. And my friend and I, Nikki, would not stop talking. And she's like, she warned us. And that was my first spanking. And that was my last spanking. But I just, I didn't think much about it because back in the day, kids just got spanked.
Right.
But nowadays, could you imagine a teacher taking your child out and spanking him?
Yeah, no.
The world would end. I mean, it might anyway.
Yeah. These days, you never know. Yeah.
But,
yeah.
One of the things that I think is also part of this kids and parents dynamic is we are still children of parents. And I know that it takes a lot of courage for an adult to break away from the controlling parent. If you have a very controlling or manipulative family member, having the courage to break away from that, even after death. I know people that are still beholden to the wishes of a controlling parent or a non-controlling parent, but well, this is what my mother would have wanted. To my children, you do you, my loves. If I am gone, I will not care. So, but what do you think about that? What do you think about adult children of controlling parents? Does that still impact the adult, the person?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that you need to set boundaries for yourself, because if you don't, those chains, I'm going to use an example. So those chains of controlling parent that wants you to do everything that they did their way. Now, mind you, when I was younger, my parents were like that. As an adult, my parents were not like that. So as an adult, we had an amazing relationship. But when I was younger, I do remember there was finally a time that I was like, you know what? I felt like I had to leave my situation. I left my home. When I was 18 years old, I moved out of my house and with my parents, and I moved in with a friend, and there was a reason, like there were reasons for that. But that said, it did make my life a little bit easier, but I was still young, right? I was 18. As an adult, looking back, I am glad that I set those boundaries when I was younger, because when I had those boundaries and as we moved forward in our relationship, they knew Patty's stubborn. Patty's not going to budge on X, Y, Z. So therefore, we can have a great relationship. We just won't be doing X, Y, Z, if that makes sense. So, yeah, so I definitely believe in that, but I also believe in breaking the chains for your generations to come. So, thankfully my parents were amazing. I would love it if my kids had half of the traits that my parents had as when I was an adult. Right. So I do believe though in breaking those chains that are hurtful, whether it's a parent or a sibling or a, family member or even friends, whatnot. It's important to break the chains because you're just going to keep passing them down from generation to generation. So somebody has to do it.
Yeah. And I think this is harder when you have like a narcissistic family member or a very manipulative family member that they will play a sibling off of a sibling off of a sibling and create strife among family. And there is that, a lot of us have one person that if they're invited, everyone's just kind of bracing. Like, there's going to be some explosion, some conflict, something that is going to cause strife on the rest of the family. And to set boundaries with that type of person is huge, and I personally set some boundaries with a family member only maybe 5 years ago. And it has been good for me, but that family member is, we don't have a relationship much anymore because of that. But it has given me a sense of peace that I had not had prior. And I waited too long because I didn't want to hurt this person. Like I didn't want to offend them. I didn't want to. And so I know that adult children, I know another woman who I love and she's the sweetest thing. And she's having to take care of her mother. And it is a complicated relationship. She wants to do it. Feels obligated to do it, but the stress on her is intense. Because that one person is just a complicated person, And so I think the sooner you can break negative traits from children, from that growth from child to young adult to older person, if you can break that chain of a negative relationship, the sooner that it happens, the better. It sounds like you were way ahead of the curve there and did it very young.
I did, and it was hard. Don't get me wrong. I remember the night that I moved out of my parents' house. I remember laying at my friend's place. I was on the floor like in a sleeping bag because, hello, I'm here. I'm moving in. And so I had a sleeping bag and I was all curled up. And I remember like a couple of tears rolling down my face because I thought, man, like that was my mom and my dad, I didn't want to hurt them. I really didn't. And that bothered me because I don't like hurting anybody. So it bothered me that I knew that they were hurt because I moved out. But at the same time, it was freeing because there were some things that, without going into tons of detail, maybe for another show or something, there were some things that were bad for my well-being that were going on in that house. And I think that it took that big of a wake-up call for my parents to realize like, oh crap, like this is not the way, like, and to like clear my dad. I guess I want to do that. He's no longer living or anything, but or anything. I don't know why I said that, or anything. He is no longer living, but my dad did not have a father figure when he was growing up. His dad passed away when he was quite young. So I understand now, looking at some of the ways, like I was treated really hard. Like when I would mess up, I would really get in big trouble, which we won't go into all the dynamics there. But so that said, I knew that I didn't deserve to have beatings. Okay. I didn't deserve some of the words that were said. So I knew I had to move and do something. And in doing so, though, thankfully, it really shook my parents enough to say, like, we need to change because we love her and we thought we were doing the right thing. We thought we had her best interests, but really, obviously it was not.
Yeah. I hope I'm that type of grandparent where, and I know my mother-in-law is the type of mother-in-law that loves her grandchildren enough, loves her son enough that it is not a controlling, she doesn't try to control my life.
Tell you how to raise your kids.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think it happened once and once only, because I was very, very clear very early on. Hey, these are my children. I get to screw up my children the way I see fit. You screwed up your child the way you saw fit. This is my turn to mess up this tiny little perfect human.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's been great. And she's just like, all right. And even if she disagrees with me, her relationship with the children and, my husband and me are more important than, battling it out.
That is so great. My parents were the most incredible grandparents. Seriously, the most incredible. And my grandparents were the most incredible grandparents. So thankfully, I had my grandparents around for a while after I was an adult. And man, I tell you what, if you're listening and your parents are still alive or your grandparents are still alive, if you have to cut boundaries, absolutely do it. But at the same time, just remember, like, nobody is perfect. And think of what could happen 10 years down the road. Would you have any regrets? If it is so bad, though, that you're getting hurt, your children are getting hurt, it's an abusive situation, do not
mentally or physically.
Yes, do not stick around because your kids are going to see that.
Yeah.
And then what happens when your kids learn something is they will pass it down until somebody else breaks it. So you might as well just break it now. Break that chain.
Right. And have that closure, have that closure because some of these things you only get to do once. So, you'll know and just think on it. And, for me, I think on it, pray on it. But yeah, just make sure that you have closure in that and have peace with those kind of decisions for sure. But there's nothing I wouldn't give to have another minute with my dad, because, that amazing, when you have that amazing person or those people in your life, that's a gift. But yeah, so kind of going back and just talking about burnout a little bit, the pressure on children sometimes to succeed now. So we're back to kind of high school age kids. That pressure in Florida, they have like 9 point something GPAs. I don't even know how that's possible. It drives me a little bit nuts. It used to go to a 4, or maybe I think our valedictorian had a 4.29 or maybe 4.3 with AP classes. How you get up to a 9 GPA just doesn't even make sense. But the money that's spent in sports and extracurricular activities, the pressure to be the best and excel, and now that we have Facebook, like, look at my perfect family. And, I think that puts an additional pressure on the children. Do you think it's too much? Do you think we've gone a little crazy, or?
Both. Yeah, I mean, there's so much pressure. It's coming at the kids from the school systems, from if you go to church, in your house, from the parents, from the siblings, from the friends, from the media. I mean, they're just really getting nailed these days with the pressure. And you know what? I just remembered a little quote that I really loved a few years ago. It hit me, and I can't remember what celebrity started this, but she basically was saying like she felt so much pressure. And so she put this quote out and everybody started saying it on social media. And it was something like, love is louder than the pressure to be perfect. And I thought that is so true. Love is louder than the pressure to be perfect. And if we can remember that and remember, to love people where they're at, that's huge, because I tell you what, I don't have any time to mess around about why I should persuade other people to like me or to love me. And I'm an adult. I'm a full grown adult. So imagine a child who has all this pressure just like piling upon them. Just remember to stand back and just love your child.
Yeah.
Where they're at.
I definitely think we're in that age of authenticity and moving into that, just loving and don't be mean, don't judge. And there is a point of too much pressure. And the kind of the final thought on this is, I think the irony is that the evidence shows that too much time on social media, on the computer period, how people are starting to get like this bone sticking out of the back of their neck, and different problems with our spine and such.
Sitting here,
I know.
I was literally just thinking my neck.
So that forcing in our eyes and the damage to our eyes and having to get, blue tinted glasses, and yet in schools, my children in high school and in college have to be on the computer all the time. They submit their work on the computer. They do their work on the computer. They watch their professors on the computer, and through sports, they have to be on a group chat to follow the sports. And game changer at baseball games, I miss scoreboards. Now, in order to find the score, I have to look on my phone while I'm at a live game. It's insane. Everything's directing us towards this thing that really is not only anxiety inducing, especially for someone like me that does not like technology very, very much, but it's also bad for eyes, bad for health, bad for our posture. There's so many negative assets, and yet we're still being tunneled and forced into it.
It's true. If you didn't hear the show that we did about social media, go back and listen to that. So I think I've said a couple of shows now, the authenticity one, and then the social media show that we did. I think both of those are important. We did one about schools, and it all kind of ties in together. Our show is really real in life person experiences. It's not something that's made up by AI. We're sharing our experiences. And as you've said, Candace, our experiences, we're just sharing, hoping that we can help somebody else. But we want you to also share with us. Maybe we can learn something from you too. And I would love that.
You took the words out of my mouth. Help us grow as well, because we definitely don't have all the answers. But thank you so much for listening and being a part of this journey with us. And just remembering, everything you do definitely has a second level impact. It really does.
Yes. Please head over to Second Level Impact on Instagram, and Candace Cieslo on Instagram, Patti Catter on Instagram, and our Facebook group, where we're going to start having more open discussions about some of our shows.
Absolutely.
So thank you all.
Thank you so much.